does. Folly. And so he goes, but I, thy handmaid, I saw not the young men of my Lord. In other words, the ones you sent to me, I didn't see them. I didn't see who you sent. So therefore, my Lord, as you live, and as your soul lives, seeing that the Lord has withholding thee from coming to shed blood and from avenging thyself with thine own hand, now let thy enemies and they that seek evil to my Lord be as Nabal, meaning being a fool.
Them be.
Let them be. Let them alone.
The illustration with those two people, it is so wonderful to see because just like my sister Meg said, we're all Nabal. Every one of us are when we're lost.
We are.
But see, here's the great thing. Once we're born again, we actually become an Abigail.
Oh, for sure.
We become a living sacrifice to lay down our lives for the will of the Father and to do His will in His kingdom. That's just beautiful.
It really is. It really is.
Can I be a troublemaker for a second?
Be troublemaker. Go ahead.
Okay. So let's say I go away on vacation for a week, right? I come back and there's a guy waiting on my porch. My house is freshly painted. My lawn is mowed. Mm-hmm. You know, the hedges are manicured. Mm-hmm. He says, "Hey, Greg, while you were gone, I painted your house, mowed your lawn, trimmed your bushes. Just pay me something."
Right.
And I say, "What? I never asked you to do any of that.
Right.
What am I supposed to pay you?" Mm-hmm. He goes, "Well, since you're not going to pay me, I'm going to come back here. I'm going to burn your house down." Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So in the same way, since David never had any deal with Nabal to guard his men and his sheep and all that, why wasn't Nabal within his right? Even though he probably should have given him something, but how is David justified? So would this guy be justified if he came back and burned my house down? How is David justified in going and killing everybody because Nabal didn't give him something?
He might not. Hold on one second. I have to handle something really quick. I'll be right back. But go ahead. You guys talk about that for a second. I'll be right back.
Brother Greg, the only thing I would say to that is I understand the example, but it's like that example doesn't illustrate what's going on in this passage. David was the authority over all of that.
What do you mean? Why was David the authority?
Well, he's the authority over the whole land.
No, he wasn't king yet. Saul was still king, right? And David was being chased around by Saul. I don't think David had taken the throne yet.
Yeah, but that whole area where Nabal and his servants were lived, that's why he said, "I've been protecting all this time."
I don't know. You might be right, but I don't know. When I read the passage, it seems like David's on the run from Saul, and he just comes into this area, and he comes upon Nabal's men, and he just kind of camps around them and protects them, without any agreement or anything. He does something nice, yeah, but I don't see that David is like any authority. You might be right. Like I said, I'm just not picking it up from what's there, but you might be right.
To me, like a more modern example would be you live in an area that is protected by police from bandits and stuff and all that, and all they come and tell you is, well, you have to pay taxes to pay the police officers.
Yeah, but like that's established though. Like what I'm saying is, I don't see here where David is an established authority yet. There's no agreement, between him and Nabal that, where David says, "Hey, I'll watch over your guys. You give me a little something." There's no agreement there. I think my example is really fitting. It's like all of a sudden this guy shows up and says, "Hey, I painted your house. I mowed your lawn. You owe me." Even though we never had any agreement. I never signed up for that. And I'm not trying to make a big deal out of it. It's just, I ask myself these questions. That's all.
Well, to me, when David first appeared to them, he wasn't asking for a whole lot, though.
Yeah, but like if some guy shows up and just paints my house, why should he ask for anything? I never asked you to paint my house. That's almost like extortion. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the mafia. Hey, we've been protecting your business here. You got a nice little restaurant you got here. Shame if something would happen to it,
You know what I think, though?
Your example is not, like I said, you're thinking that David came trying to exact payment, and he didn't.
No,
all he was asking for was kindness. And Nabal, not only did he not show just basic hospitality, but he outright just threw it in David's face. Who are you? Kick rocks, dude.
Well, yeah, but if I came back from vacation and some guy said, "Hey, while you were gone, I painted your house and mowed your lawn," wouldn't I be justified to say, "Who are you? Kick rocks"? Wouldn't I be justified to say that?
But would you, if you weren't paying him, Brother Greg, would you at least say, you know what? I really do appreciate with what you did. So I'd like to invite you over for dinner, and we'd love to give you dinner for doing what you did. You know what I'm saying? But the guy is insisting that you pay. But out of the kindness of your heart, you would offer him dinner for what he did.
But see,
maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. But let's say I didn't. Now the guy is saying, "Well, I'm going to come back and burn down your house." How is the guy now justified in that when I never made a contract with him to begin with?
All I would say is, we live in Texas. Don't mess with Texas. That's what I would say.
What about this? They knew the hand of God was with David. His reputation preceded that. So it would be kind of reckless. Of course, this guy, obviously he had no concern about that, but maybe that's where David gets his, God is with me type of attitude. All right, you're not going to go along with me. I don't know, just a thought.
I think this. Here's what I think. I think that there's a lot of merit to what Greg brings up, but we have to understand there's two ways of looking at this whole thing, and one is from God's perspective, the divine perspective, and one is from man's perspective. Now we have to think about David in the situation that he was actually in as a king. As a king, and being a king has certain entitlements to being a king. You know what I mean? And so the way I see the situation is a lot. I look at it this way. David has the ability to exercise things based on the reputation that we know for him to have. And so the issue for us reading this whole thing in 1 Samuel is for us to understand something, which is that this was real life to them back then. David at this time, and what is going on with Nabal and Abigail, this was real life. We get to look at this, read this, and glean from it what is beneficial to us as believers today. So that being said, I know I'm getting wordy about this, is that David, he may not have had justifiable grounds for doing what he set out to attend. In fact, I will go so far as to say that had he done what he was about to do, he might have been wrong in doing so. In other words, if David had wiped out their entire family for all the stuff that they were, and all that stuff, he might have been wrong. But here's the issue. What actually happened?
And what authority was David walking in?
But see, well, exactly. See, David, because remember, David was king when he took Bathsheba. David was king when he sent Bathsheba's husband, Uriah, out to the front lines. where he knew what would happen. So here's what I'm saying. David, I believe that, Greg, I believe you're right. I believe that if David had done what was in his mind to do, he might have found out that it would not have been something that was necessarily pleasing to God. But here's the thing. Just like Abimelech was withheld from sitting against what was it, Abraham, when Abimelech was ready to take Sarah. Remember when Abraham lied and said, "That's not my wife, that's my sister." Remember that? And so Abimelech was going to go like, "Okay, cool. Well, that means I can have my way with her." But God went to Abimelech and said, "You messing with the wrong woman. You messing with the wrong woman." And from God's perspective, at that point, Abraham was behaving like an idiot because he was lying to Abimelech about who Sarah was. And she was an attractive woman. Well, Abimelech says, "Who is this woman to you, Abraham?" Abraham, "Oh, that's my sister. Don't worry about it. You can, whatever. That's my sister." He lied. And so we are told that God, because he went to Abimelech, if you go back and read the account, God went to Abimelech and says, "I am with you. Don't touch that woman. If you touch her, you are going to deal with me." And Abimelech was like, "Okay." And then remember, Abimelech went back to Abraham and says, "Why did you lie to me about Sarah? Why did you tell me she was your sister? Why did you tell me this thing about me? Why did you put me in a situation to be in this bad situation between me and God?" But God warned Abimelech in a dream and said, "You better leave her alone." But I think that David was in a situation right now where he was about to do something that was wrong. But God withheld him. And God withheld him. And in this situation, we see God withholding David. And this should show us something. And here's what I'm saying. Here's what I believe it should show us. Is that God, in the case of Abigail and Nabal, God is showing us that we should not be expecting him to do anything that is contrary to his nature. God is not going to just arbitrarily kill people for no reason, number one. But what we also see here is that when he deals with mankind, the unbeliever and the believer, we see that God, to some degree, deals mercifully with both groups of people. But the believers he deals with as children, but the unbelievers he deals with as his enemies. So my point is this: what is happening with David and Nabal, and what David has in his mind to do, I believe David, like Greg, like he's suggesting, I believe David would have been wrong. He would have been wrong. But I also believe God kept him from going there wrong. But the issue is, what is it that we are supposed to glean from this?
Good answer.
What's that, Greg?
I said good answer.
Yeah. What is it that we are supposed to glean from this? Because sometimes we want God to step in on things and react a certain way that we don't realize are not the good ways of doing things. David represents our Lord. David is a type of Christ in a lot of ways, but David is also a man. He's also a man. And we see David's natural proclivities. They cling to him throughout his entire life. And yet and still, he was a man that was after God's own heart. So would he have been wrong had he done what he was set out to do? He would have been wrong, which I believe that's why God restrained him, which is why Abigail stood into the gap. But here's the lesson that we're supposed to learn from this. And I kind of want to say it, I mean, I kind of want to not say it and ask people what we think the lesson is. In fact, let me do that. What do we think the lesson is in God restraining David from doing what he did and for accepting the approach that Abigail made to David and turned him around? What for us as Christians today, when we read this that happened then, what are we supposed to glean from it?
Because there has to be an intercessor.
So elaborate some more on that, Meg.
There has to be somebody who she interceded on Nabal's behalf and withheld David's anger, the same as Christ did, how he interceded and he withheld the wrath of God.
Absolutely.
Well, I think.
Go ahead, Brian.
For one, I just got something there. You taught me something, brother. But I think like almost even bigger than that. It's not about us. God provides an intercessor. He provides an atonement. Even when us as believers like David might do something that would bring a reproach upon his glory and his name, he will provide something to stay that hand, because it's not about us.
Right.
It's about his name and his glory.
Right. You're right about that.
That made me think of a bunch of stuff. That made me think of Adam and Eve in the garden when they tried to clothe themselves, and God provided, which I believe to be a lamb, and clothed them. He said, "Oh no, you can't clothe you. I have to clothe you." Then we go to Abraham and Isaac.
Yes.
When God provided the sacrifice for Abraham and Isaac.
Yep.
So every single time something's intervened, it's like, hold on, stop. I'm getting my glory here. I'm going to provide this.
That's exactly 100% correct. Because and I was going to bring up Abraham, and Meg said it, and that's exactly the truth. When he was going to offer up Isaac as a sacrifice, and Abraham was like, Isaac was like, Dad, I know we're going up to this mountain to make a sacrifice, but there's no sheep here. There's just you and me and a knife, and I don't have it. You have the knife. But they go up. And Abraham gets to the point where he raises that knife, and God has to stop him because he realizes that Abraham will do exactly what God told him to do. And David, like Abraham, went as far as he could go until God stepped in and withheld him from doing what he did. And he withheld him because of Abigail standing in the gap. Like Moses, like Abraham did, like other of the patriarchs did, they stood in the gap and they kept God from doing to men like Nabal what was deserved.
What about stop being a fool and putting other people's life in jeopardy?
I like when people get down to brass tacks.
I'm giving it to you with broad knuckles. Stop being a jerk. Stop being a fool. Because when you're foolish, and you ain't got no humility in your life, you put everybody's life in danger.
Yep.
That's the bottom line to that.
That's the bottom line.
But you know what? Here's the thing, too. It's beautiful to see how God even used the foolish in the plan of redemption that was from the very beginning. Every single person was used for the glory of God, no matter where they were or what they did. It was all for his purpose. It is his will, his way, his sovereignty, his control. It's all about him.
In verse 27, it says, Abigail says, "And now this blessing which your handmaid has brought unto my Lord, let it even be given unto the young men that follow my Lord." Right? So in other words, so here's what's happening in verse 27. Abigail is giving David what he was asking Nabal for. She goes out to meet him and she gives it to him. And in verse 28, "I pray thee, forgive the trespass of thine handmaid." Now keep in mind, she hadn't sinned at all. But she says, "I pray thee, forgive the trespass of thine handmaid. For the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord fights the battles of the Lord, Jehovah, and evil has not been found in thee all thy days. Yet a man is risen to pursue thee and to seek thy soul, but the soul of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of life, which the Lord thy God and the souls of thine enemies, them shall he cling, or shall he sling out as out of the middle of a sling. Which is interesting because she talks about the sling, and I'm sure most people knew what David was famous for, which was for destroying Goliath with the sling. You know, but here's one thing that I want to bring out to everybody that I was going to bring out in the last one, but I didn't, but we ran out of time. Is this? Notice this. Abigail sends emissaries with all of these good things that David asked for, all of the fruits and stuff that he asked for to feed his people, his men. She puts all this stuff, puts it on the back of a donkey, of an ass, sends it back to David, and she tells her men, I'm going to follow behind you. I'm going to come behind you. Now, so she goes out to meet David. So they go out to meet David, give him everything, the provender, and then she comes along and after them, and then they find her. And then they have this meeting, and they get together and have this meeting of the minds. And David is really thankful to her for what she did. And she's thanking him for what? What is Abigail thanking David for doing or not doing? Anybody?
For withholding the wrath, judgment, withholding the consequences.
Exactly. That's
and I don't know. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Greg.
I don't know if it was on one of your little short videos that you put up or if it was on one of these lives, but at some point you brought up the idea that, the only reason this world still exists is because of us, is because of the elect. We're the reason God hasn't yet brought judgment on the world, because he's patient toward us, not willing that any of us should perish, right? But so until all the elect are gathered in, that judgment is stayed. And like Meg said, and Meg, in the words of Meatloaf, you took the words right out of my mouth. It's all intercession. It's the principle of intercession.
Yeah. So Abigail, in verse 28, she says, "I pray thee, forgive the trespass of thy handmaid, for the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord fights the battles of the Lord Jehovah, and evil has not been found in thee all thy days." Verse 29, "Yet a man is risen to pursue thee and to seek thy soul, but the soul of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of life with the Lord thy God, and the souls of your enemies shall he sling out as out of the middle of a sling." In other words, they shall be flung out like a sling, like a rock out of a sling. Verse 30, "It will come to pass when the Lord shall have done to my Lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning thee, and shall have appointed thee ruler over Israel." Verse 31, "That this shall be no grief unto you, nor offense of heart unto your soul, either that you has shed blood causeless, or that my Lord has avenged himself. But when the Lord shall have dwelt well with my Lord, then remember your handmaid."
All right, we have to read this one more time because this points back exactly to where we were. "That in this shall be no grief unto thee, nor offense of heart unto my Lord, either that thou hast shed blood causeless, or that my Lord has avenged himself. Who else shed his blood without cause? Christ.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow, that's cool.
Absolutely. And here's something else that's here to understand. If you remember, Abigail, David's a king. She knows that. Nabal knew this. But when he says, who is David, he was like being like, who is David? Like, who is he that I should be whatever? But he knew who David was. They all knew who David was. David's name went everywhere. So here's the thing. Abigail, she went out to meet the Lord. I mean, to meet David, to meet the king. She went out to meet the king. But she sent the fruits. She sent what he was seeking ahead. And she came near secretly. But it says that David and his men, they found her. They sought, she tried to go secretly, but they caught her. But what she did was she sent emissaries out. And then she went out. So she sent the emissaries out, and then she followed behind them. So the emissaries that she sent, they gave David the things he was asking for. Then they caught her along the way. And then David then, as a result of having received the provender, then accepted it from her and then gives her credit for withholding him from keeping him from destroying her and her family and her people. And now she's asking to remember your handmaid in verse 31. Remember your handmaid. Now here's what I want to ask you. There's at least a couple examples in the scriptures where a godly person went out to meet someone who was of importance, a person of significance, in order to allay any potential wrath that may come their way. Had they not come out to meet this important person first. There was a custom back in the old covenant. There was a custom that whenever somebody who was powerful, a king, a ruler, was coming to you, you would send out emissaries to go meet them. And then you would say, everything is cool. We'll come out to meet you. Come on back with us. Can anybody think of any examples of this happening in the Bible?
Jacob and Esau.
Explain.
When Jacob had left, and went, he left and went to work and got his two wives. But when he came back, he's got all his wives, children, servants, and all that stuff. But the Esau came out to meet him, and Esau's a man in his own right at this time. And he sent servants ahead. That's when, he wrestled with God, but he sent servants ahead and everything.
Who sent the servants ahead?
Jacob did.
He sent the servants ahead to who?
Esau.
For what?
To try to keep him from slaughtering them all. He was scared.
He was scared. He was. And Esau was born to be a warrior. He was born man of the field.
Yeah, another illustration. I don't know why I kept thinking about this when you was reading those scriptures about what Abigail said to David is, I'm wanting to say it was Gamaliel when they were with the Sanhedrin, and he told the Pharisees, they're wanting to kill him.
Right.
And he told them, he was like, look, man, if God's with him, you need to just leave this guy alone. Mm-hmm. If God's not with him, it's not going to come to anything. Mm-hmm. But if God is with him, we're actually fighting against God. And that's exactly almost what Abigail was saying. She saw who that was.
She knew who David was.
She's like, yeah, God's gonna be with you.
Right.
Ain't no enemy gonna stand against you. Remember your servant.
So my brother Brian here, so one of the first examples that I was asking about, he got the first one. There's another example of somebody of people going out to reaching out to a superior power, and it's not necessarily a superior power. It's that when somebody was coming, when somebody of authority was coming to visit you, you would go out to meet them, and that's how you greeted these authoritative figures. And so, rightly so, Brian mentioned Jacob and Esau. When Jacob wanted to cross through Esau's land to go on his journey, he sent gifts out to Esau, and he sent some of his people out to Esau before he went, to make sure that he was appeased. So he sent out emissaries to gauge Esau's perspective and see if he can get him to accommodate. But Jacob knew full well what he had done to his older brother, in that he was extra cautious about approaching him himself. So he sent out emissaries. And then then what would end up happening, if the coast was clear, basically, then Jacob, Esau would come in, or Jacob would meet him, and they would discuss what they needed to do and go for it, and go on from there. There's another example of this in the old covenant. Can anybody think of what other situation this resembles, where somebody of authority is coming into town, and then the king or whoever they're coming to visit goes out to meet them, to bring them back in, to usher them back in with them. Who else? What else does this happen to?
The Book of Ruth?
Who?
Would it be the Book of Ruth?
No.
With Boaz?
Nope.
Lot.
What about Joseph in slavery?
Nope.
No.
What about Jonah?
Well, who met Jonah? Nobody liked Jonah.
No, but the Lord met him there and told him that he needed to go to Nineveh.
Yeah, but outside of the Lord being involved, just individuals.
Oh, people.
Regular people. Who else? We saw Jacob did it with Esau. Jacob sent Esau gifts and said, "Hey, I come in peace. All right, here's the thing. Somebody in the comments said Solomon. Essie. She says Solomon. Essie is right. Does anybody know why she's right? What experience does Solomon have that resembles what happens with Jacob and Esau, and what resembles what happens with
Solomon?
With Solomon. But also Abigail and David.
When he was going to divide the baby in half, and the mother said no.
No. It happened in that sequence of history. But what happened? So the same person that said Solomon, she also mentioned Sheba. So now that gives you a scenario. What happened with Solomon and Sheba? When Sheba came into town, what happened?
I don't know.
Anybody remember? Anybody?
Let us learn.
Well, she came there.
Solomon, basically she was interested in meeting with Solomon, and she sent him a bunch of.
He ran out to meet her, as he said.
He ran out to meet her. He sent his people out there to meet her.
Good job, Essie.
Because she was a queen.
She was a queen. And Solomon sent his emissaries out there to meet her. Even though he was way more powerful than her, she was a queen.